On this episode of the Lobby of Hobbies podcast, we sit down with Rainer from Board and Dice to discuss company goals and reaching new and casual gamers, their big releases for 2020, GenCon 2020 Online, and the soon-to-release Kickstarter, Yedo Deluxe. So welcome, my name is Jazz from the Lobby of Hobbies podcast, and today we have Rainer here from Board and Dice, who is the Ops Manager for North America. Rainer, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, happy to be here.
Rainer, just a little bit about what we do here at the Lobby of Hobbies. Our idea is my friend Judge and I have recently just started up this podcast, and us as minorities here in the area that we're in New Jersey, very close to Camden City and Philadelphia. Our demographic growing up very rarely was introduced to board games, the modern board games that we know. We played the Clue, Sorry, the Monopoly, things like that. But as myself, I got into the hobby, and I got my friend into the hobby. We started understanding that it really was something that was not, there was a culture disparity. And it wasn't necessarily that it wasn't reaching different cultures. It was just sometimes that maybe within the culture, it wasn't always being introduced, because maybe it was wherever we're at in the inner cities, a lot of sports, basketball, things like that are the forefront of what we do. So our vision has always been to introduce the hobby that we enjoy to people that, to the kids that we were pretty much growing up, necessarily lower income or middle class within our culture. But as we've been doing, our idea is to reach new gamers and introduce them, slowly but surely into the lightweight party games, medium weight games, and even the heavier games, which I know Board and Dice has a lot of games on that medium weight to heavier weight games, and a lot of them that I am very interested in myself. I have a Teo here and in my collection. But one thing I wanted to know about Board and Dice is, what is the target audience that you guys reach or attempt to reach?
So we've actually had so our core business is hobby gamers, right? That's the majority of the games that we make. But we also believe that this is a hobby that should be inviting, and we're looking for ways to make it so that just because something is a hobby game, that doesn't mean that you can't enjoy it with other people that are new to the hobby or people that are very casual, because a lot of people enjoy games, but they find the games that we typically enjoy, those of us that are playing a lot of games, right, they find them intimidating because usually there's a high barrier to entry. So we do have every year, we do, in the first half of the year, we do a title that is a little bit more approachable, more casual, that has a lighter set of rules. And the goal really with that game is to be able to, when you look at the back of the box, you should be able to get enough of a description from the game right there so that you can not necessarily sit down and play it right away, but have a complete idea of what that game is like. And we actually used to have, a couple of years ago, we had a line of much lighter family games that we did under the Strawberry Studio line. It didn't work so well, not necessarily because the games weren't well, but we just didn't know how to properly sell and market those games. So that was something that we over time, we tried a lot of things, but we realized that we were not good at necessarily both finding those games and also then being able to market them. So we've focused more on that light to medium, and now also the medium to heavy.
I think that's awesome, because I think it's very important. Like I said, it is a hobby, so you're going to have different gamers. You're going to have light gamers and heavy gamers, and for a company to be open, to making sure that they make at least one title that's going to probably hit that target audience of that lighter gamers, to kind of start to transition. I think that's pretty cool what you guys do with that. Like I said, I've been introduced to you guys more so from a line of getting into the heavier games more recently. I would say within the past year or so, from other hobby gamers that I've met and being at conventions like PAX Unplugged for the past few years. And I know speaking, with just how things have been changing, we know that this weekend is GenCon 2020, but it's online this year. We know that COVID-19 has definitely drastically changed conventions throughout the entire world. But with your company, with Board and Dice, my question, how has COVID kind of changed the plan that you guys had with games or even game releases for the year and game announcements?
So immediately when it really became serious in the United States, and I'm talking about when in the public awareness that it became serious, right? Which was in early March, when people became aware of the situation. One of the things that happened then, and it was a bit of a, looking back at it now, it was definitely worth it, but at the time it was a bit of a risk, so many unknowns. We knew early on that this was going to impact the rest of the year. We knew that conventions, even though they had not been announced that they were going to be closing, that was the only logical outcome. So that was something that, yes, none of them had officially said, y'all, we're canceling Gen Con or anything, but that was where things were progressing towards. So we immediately said, okay, we need to start adjusting right now. How do we approach? Because normally we use conventions as a place to be able to meet with media, to be able to show off our games, to be able to demo it to people. And then it kind of spreads through word of mouth from there, right?
Yes.
But what we started doing already in March is I keep joking a little bit about it, even though it's very much a serious concept that I'm basically on day 140 of an online convention. Okay. In March, when the pandemic first began, gotcha. Since then I have been demoing our games online using various online platforms like Tabletopia and using Discord or other things for audio and video chat, and just been demoing our games constantly since then. So this week, yes, it happens to be Gen Con, but Gen Con is not just a 4-day event. It's a part of a 4.5-month convention that is going to continue for several months still, right?
Gotcha.
And I think that at the time, this seemed like a big risk to take, to invest a lot of time and effort into trying to run. So for example, like we're just saying that we have several heavier games. That means that trying to demo those online, that means that they're harder to teach. They take longer to play than they would at a table. But I have demoed now of this year's releases so far. I've probably run about 100 demos total.
Wow.
And the time investment that goes into that, now that's spread out over several months, right? Rather than being very focused at single in-person events. But that has also had a huge impact on us being able to maintain brand awareness, being able to be in the hobby gamers awareness as well of the titles that are coming out, and continue to build that throughout the year, right?
Yeah. Now, do you think the ability to be able to demo these games, over a platform like Tabletopia has allowed hobby gamers to get a little bit more of the meat and potatoes of what the actual game is, as opposed to kind of sometimes being forced, not necessarily forced along, but kind of the feeling of just being rushed, of maybe they're demoing a game and then they have a crowd of people around them waiting for a game at a convention. Do you think they're able to get a better gist of what the game actually feels like before they make that purchase or that pre-order?
In some ways, I think. I mean, the downside is you always see at a convention, there are people that stand back a little bit and they just want to observe. They're looking at, okay, are people having fun? Are they? And you completely miss out on that. So there's no way for a casual observer to stand and say, okay, well, what's it looking like from a distance? You either get them to sit down and demo with you, or you will just wear yourself out trying to get their attention, because it's not going to make a difference. On the other hand, once you actually sit down and do the demo, now it becomes more personal, because everyone is craving that social interaction that we haven't had. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, we still need some human interaction. And
Yes.
especially if you're in this hobby and you're enjoying board games, not having that means that once you can sit down and say, well, this is not as good as an in-person game, but man, I get to sit and learn about a new game. I get to actually play it and see what it's going to be like. So I feel like the response to the actual demos have been better, but I'm not sure that there is a way that makes up for the inability to kind of show off to a broader audience by just being in a general presence.
Correct. Well, I think that's important, because I think it kind of leads me to my next question, because normally at a convention, like you said, you do have the casual gamers. Myself, I personally have not been to Gen Con. It was actually on my plans this year that kind of got X'd out. But with other conventions that I have been to, I have spoken with other publishers and some designers, and like they said, when they're showing off their game, the ability, like you said, to have a casual person just looking from the outside in at people who are demoing, and then maybe to be drawn in with something that they liked, or maybe the booth was a little emptier that time, so they felt a little bit more of the introverts, to step in and kind of demo that game. And sometimes it kind of helps, I guess, in a publisher's the ability to sell at a booth, right? Because now you have this casual gamer who's able to actually try it, and they do enjoy the game. So do you think with the way the conventions are kind of set up, especially like Gen Con, it's definitely going to been geared towards, and the people that you're getting are definitely more of the hobbyists that are more, into the hobby, as opposed to getting someone who's completely new to the hobby like you would at a convention?
I think it's difficult because you have two challenges. One of them is the burden and the requirement for us who run the demos, the inability to sit and observe people and see, okay, did they understand this rule? Are they just thinking, or are they struggling with understanding something? And being able to try to do that in an online environment is very difficult, because you don't have the same read of people. It's very anonymous, and you don't see that they might sit there and think, they might feel now rushed instead, because it's one thing to sit at the table and take some time to think about something, but when you're in an online environment and everyone else is just kind of like, hello, is this thing on, right? And so that becomes a big challenge. Now, as far as the audience that participates, I think it's been a mixed bag, and I'm not sure that I have a full understanding necessarily of what the answer is. But I have noticed that it's been easier for people to invite someone who's like, hey, well, I really wanted to demo this, and there's this person in my game group who would also be interested. Is it okay if they tag along? And it's been much easier, because there's not the requirement of having to buy expensive convention tickets, and not necessarily the tickets, but being able to travel, take time off of work, being able to be there. Because that's definitely a big barrier, especially for people who are more casual, or for people who are, I mean, it's difficult to go to a convention, right? It's very expensive, and it's time consuming, and whether or not you have the financial means to do it, it's still sometimes prohibitive, just for the sake of the time and effort that it takes, right? Yeah. But now I've found that there are people who would never have been able to go to a convention that I have been able to demo to. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. I think this is all new territory for all of us, and we're trying it out, and it's working. But I don't have an answer to how because I don't think that this online gaming is going to go away. This used to be a secondary tool for us, and now it's become a primary tool that we will continue to use, even if there are in-person conventions. But the shape that it will take, and how we can get a better read for who we are reaching, making sure that we specifically give opportunities to those that may not be able to come to a convention for whatever reason.
I think that's interesting. I think you touched the point, like you said, it's new, right? So everything with the pandemic has made things new. But I did want to talk about your releases. I know
Mm-hmm.
myself, you guys had a very, to me, I thought was a very interesting game with very interesting mechanics last year at GenCon, Sierra West, which was a
Mm-hmm.
nice kind of set, good tableau building, almost worker placement type combo of a game that had this pretty cool intricacy of how you laid your cards in your little, I guess you call it your tower, depending on what module you were using.
Right.
And it was very well received the last year. So this year, what are some of the games that you are demoing, your big releases, and some of your announcements that are coming out of GenCon?
So we did have in May, we had a game that, so again in the more family weight line, we had a game called Traintopia, which has done really well for us. It's a tile drafting game, and basically you're building train routes, and you are placing different commuters and tourists and so forth, and trying to score victory points. And the nice thing about this game is that it's very easy to set it down and for a more casual gamer to understand, okay, I'm building out my routes. I need to connect the train routes, and I want long routes that make sense. And so it's been very approachable that way. But at the same time, if we were sitting down and playing a game, I can look over and say, oh, I see you need this tile. I better take it because I can use it in a distance. So it still has that value for more. For more hobby gamers, right? Of being able to have those choices in the game. So that one has done really well for us, and we're still demoing that as well. Then we have our GenCon release, which is also it's a game by Daniele Tassini, who did Teotihuacan, called Tekhenu. It's a co-design between Tassini and David Turczi. And that one is set in ancient Egypt. It's around the time of what's modern-day Karnak at Luxor in Egypt, when that was being built, the temple complex of Amun-Ra and the Ibet Isut area of that. And that one has done really well. It's been relatively easy to demo online as well. It's a dice drafting game. It requires a little bit more familiarity maybe with how to play a game in an online environment, because it's not just a single component. It's not just that you're taking tiles or cards. It's okay, you have these dice, and sometimes you need to manipulate the dice because you have to set them to a certain value and so forth. But with us, when we're demoing, we're trying to help out with as much of the admin of the game as possible, right? So that the people that are playing it can focus on just playing it. If you need resources, I'll be happy to. If you need to draw, because a lot of people are, well, how do I draw 5 at a time? I'll be happy to do that for you. You focus on playing the game, and we help with the game admin stuff. And then we have a game that is coming out at what would have been a Spiel, but there will also be an online convention, and that's Tawantinsuyu, which is set in the time of the Incan Empire. So in fact, Tawantinsuyu is what the Incas called their empire. It means the 4 regions in the Quechua language. And that one it's a worker placement combined with some resource management and set collection and area majority. And we've been demoing that one as well.
Awesome. It's funny because I personally have Tekhenu, and how do you say it? Tawantinsuyu?
Tawantinsuyu. Yep.
I have both of those on pre-order.
Oh, awesome.
Tassini, those guys they're great, great designers. And then I have just recently got into their games. You know, definitely heavier, but what I do like about it, it's something that I haven't been able to sit down. I mean, I've recently actually got my Teotihuacan to the table. I want to say this, I think last week. It's been on my shelf for a while. But what's really cool about these games that I personally have noticed, and I've had like my friend who's definitely more on the casual side, is that the game, while it does have a lot going on, a lot of thinking, you know, which could lead to some analysis paralysis. The turns seem very easy. The turn structures are not too hard, which I think after a round or two is fairly you know, very good to catch on. Do you think with these two new releases coming out, do they fall into that same weight and that same kind of a lot to do but easy turn structure?
It's definitely true when it comes to Tekhenu. So I mean, Teotihuacan is a game that when if you were to just describe, okay, what do you do on your turn? Well, you move a worker and you do an action with it, right? That's really all you do. On the other hand, each action has so many steps to it. Oh, and did you remember the technology that you have? And are you building multiple tiles at the temple? Because first you do these 4 steps for the first tile, then you do those steps again for the second tile and for the third tile, and don't forget to level up afterwards, right? There are so many things that can chain together, which means if I'm demoing the game at a convention, for example, then it's easy. The players can focus on playing the game because I am there to help remind everyone of the steps that you need to do. And once you've played through it, then it becomes, okay, it's not, if you get used to doing the steps in a certain order, right, then it becomes second nature. But for someone to actually pick up that game and learn it on their own, that can be very, very challenging because your first playthrough is not going to be with a good flow. You're going to struggle through things and be like, okay, now I'm building a tile again. How does this work? Okay. With Tekhenu, the nice thing is that every action is more self-contained. So even though there's more variety to what you do on your turn, every action, so they're all associated with different Egyptian gods. So let's take the Hathor action. Whenever you're taking that action, you're focusing on just a part of the game board. So you can say, okay, this is now, I don't need to worry about any of the other actions or what they do, because right now I'm just trying to do this, and this is how this action will score for me. There are little reminders on the board to tell you, okay, when you're placing a building over here, do these 3 steps in order, and a consistent iconography. So it's been a much more, the barrier to entry has been lowered because it's easier to get into, because every time you can say, okay, I'm just going to try out this game and that action seemed complicated, so I'm just going to focus on the rest. And you can do that while remaining competitive because you don't have time to do everything anyway. So you can just, well, this seems fun. I'm going to focus on increasing my population and my happiness. And that's a viable strategy. Or you can say, you know what, I'm just going to build workshops and quarries. And that's a viable strategy. And every time all of the information is just right there for you. So it's one where the rules complexity is definitely lower than Teotihuacan, even though the individual actions are a little bit more complicated. But you can discard a lot of the information, whereas in Teotihuacan you do need to do, to a certain extent, a little bit of everything. So you need to know what all 8 action boards do, whereas in Tekhenu you can more easily pick and choose. So in that sense, I feel like it's a more streamlined experience, even though the games are very different. But the way it plays out feels a little bit smoother of a process.
Awesome. I think that's good. And what really draw my attention was your earlier release for this year, Traintopia. It's something that I honestly, until I had looked at your line of games in which you guys had at your booth, your virtual booth for GenCon, it wasn't something that I had even heard of. But looking at it, the first thing I think of is, just looking at the pictures that I've seen online, is I think of Carcassonne mixed with Ticket to Ride, right? That's what I personally think of, building train routes and stuff like that. So is this something that someone who, and I understand the drafting of the tiles, which is a pretty cool thing, instead of just, with, a game like Carcassonne where you're just, randomly drawing a tile and you kind of get what you get in building. So does this, while it definitely is that family weight lighter game, and I think you were talking about it earlier, the layer of strategy in that game is what I guess you were alluding to, is inviting for that hobbyist gamer, that someone who's looking for that meatier strategic type of game.
Yeah, and especially because it's with the drafting, so if you're just playing on a casual level, you will just say, okay, what's coming out this turn? This tile seems cool. That will allow me to do this. If you're used to making long-term plans in games, then you know, okay, I need to make this track 8 tiles long to maximize the number of points that I get for it, and not 9, because at 9 or more, I don't get any extra points. So 8 is the perfect length. How can I make sure that I get this track to be exactly 8 long, and so that I maximize the other scoring opportunities while I'm building that track? You know that there are 3 colors of commuters in the game. There are 5 of each of them, but you don't know if all of them are going to come out. You need to remember, okay, we've had 3 green ones come out already. That means that this green one that is coming out, there's no guarantee that I will see another one again. I better take it now. So the even though the choices are very, very simple and straightforward, and you can play it and just say, well, this seems cool. This will give me 5 points this turn. That's better than this other thing that would only give me 4. But as a more hobby gamer, this is part of your long-term plan, and you're saying, okay, I need to, over the course of the 8 rounds or 9 rounds, depending on the number of players, I have an overall goal that I'm trying to achieve, and I need to also do that better than this other person, because you tend to more look at, okay, what are you doing? Ooh, you're having that track. I cannot let you take this tile, right? And so those become decisions that a hobby gamer will more naturally, because the game itself is not heavy, you have plenty of time to be able to look at these things, observe what the other players are doing. Oh, you're probably pursuing that as your secret objective. That means that you want that tile. That means that I can take this other thing first, because you're probably going to leave my second choice for me for next turn. So that's the decision making process that is there if you want it and if you're looking for it. But it's completely unnecessary for a casual gamer. And in fact, you're not even bothered by that, because you can still play and enjoy the game without that added complexity.
That's interesting. It piques my interest, because I know my wife and even a lot of friends that I've, got into introducing to the hobby, 2 of the games that I always pick out are Carcassonne and Ticket to Ride. And I think for them, just understanding how Carcassonne, just when you see tiles and then when you see trains, those are the 2 games that are gonna pop out to them, that everyone that I've played with enjoys. And this, I think, if I can just say, hey, this looks like Carcassonne and Ticket to Ride on the table, I think I can easily get people to the table definitely for myself, getting that heavier strategy within a game that is geared towards families. And I think that's interesting. I definitely will be looking at this one. My last question that I have is regarding the new Kickstarter that you guys have. Well, I wouldn't say it's the newest Kickstarter. It was a Kickstarter that was recently, it's ready to actually fulfill, which is the Yedo Deluxe Master Set, which is one I'm waiting to get in. It's one that I was introduced to a friend of mine who, this is his #1 game of all time.
Oh, nice.
And he most recently introduced it to me last year, and I fell in love with it. And I got onto that Kickstarter and kickstarted this right away at the highest, the highest full deluxe level. And I'm excited for it, because I was very interested. I'm a worker placement junkie. But to understand the worker placement with definitely a lot of take that aspect into it. My question is, being an older game, what was one of the biggest reasons you guys, wanted to, I guess, unearth this classic? Because that exactly is what it is. It's a classic. And I know, having a deluxe edition is something that after it's released, people are going to be looking for, even on that secondary market.
I mean, it's a combination of things. So we did this with another title previously. So we did this with Snowdonia.
Yes.
And Snowdonia, it was really three reasons that kind of led to that. Well, 4 maybe. One was that some of us internally, we liked that game, and we saw, oh, this game is so good. But depending on who you are, there are so many little scenarios that had been released for it. Some of them were very difficult to get. There had been extra promos that had been available, or sometimes the designer Tony Boydell, he would just carry cards with him in his pocket and meet someone at a convention, draw something for them, be like, here's a promo card, right? And the idea of saying, wouldn't it be nice to be able to bring this classic game back onto the market, spruce it up with deluxe components, is to make it more attractive for people that may have heard of it, right? And say, oh, this would be nice, including everything that was in it before. So now you have a complete game with every promo, no matter how hard it was to find previously, it will come in the game. So now if you're a completionist, you have everything in it, right? But then it was also the fact that this is a game that it would also make financial sense, right? Because in the end, we're running a business and it needs to make sense. This is a game that was well regarded. It was not currently in print and so forth. So those things all worked well together. I mean, we had an internal passion for it. It made sense. We liked the designer. He liked us, and that relationship. And then, so that was how Snowdonia came about. Now with Yedo, we had worked with the designers previously on a game that they actually designed for us a couple of years ago under the NSCAN Games brand. And so we already had a relationship with them, and it was, wouldn't it be nice to be able to bring Yedo back into print? And as part of that, what about being able to do a few things to kind of bring that, also modernizing it, giving a few people like having options, right? Customizing the experience. Some people like a lot of interaction between the players. Other people don't want any of that, but want other things to do. Wouldn't it be nice to take the old classic game, but also adding a few extra modules, things that would not necessarily be viable as an expansion, because people would say, well, I don't want that high interaction expansion. I would just want this other thing, and making them as a piecemeal thing or small packs is just not something that would work. But now this was a way to take the game, getting it back into print and providing extra content for it, and also be able to then do screen printed wooden pieces and other components and so forth. So it's one of those things that there's a combination of factors, right? It's either someone that we've worked with or wanted to work with, or vice versa, and games that are well liked and well loved, and then for us it makes sense to do it. So those are the I think that the main factors of why it became something that we decided to publish.
Awesome. Yeah, I know a lot of people are definitely excited for that one. I know it's one that when I was introduced, I said, wow, this game is, how did I miss this game being a worker placement junkie? But I know it's one that I know is going to look beautiful on the table, and now with the player mat and all that other stuff. It's going to
I have a production copy of it here that I just got from the factory. So
Awesome. But do you have it? You have it to possibly to show the box?
I do. I have one that I just got from the factory that is kind of like the final production version of it. So, yeah.
Awesome. I'm definitely excited for this one. But I want to thank you, Rainer, for sitting down with us, and I will definitely be looking for the time to play some Tekhenu and I gotta pronounce it again. It's Tawantinsuyu, right? Tawantinsuyu. I'm definitely gonna be looking to play those. Those have been on my list, but you've opened my eyes to Traintopia. I will definitely be in this weekend to try and play those 3 games.
Awesome.
But I definitely thank you for the time sitting down with us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And anything that you want to close out or say to the listeners out there?
I just want people to take this time to basically, as hard as it is with the current lack of interaction and so forth, there are other tools out there, and it's being able to take advantage of some of the online platforms. At least I feel like it will tie us over, and things are going to get better. But until then, we should all be safe. We should wear our masks, and we should be kind to one another.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rainer, for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Lobby of Hobbies podcast, where we invite you to enter, share, and discover with us. For future episodes, catch us on anchor.fm/Lobby of Hobbies, as well as Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. But until next time, we'll see you later.